Step away from the equipment, now. Hands up.
Officer, this is a public memorial. I am not doing anything illegal.
I didn't ask for a speech. You're loitering. You're making people nervous.
I am a retired U.S. Marine. I am unarmed.
You need to calm down. Turn around. You're not in charge here.
Officer Derek Stanton stood with his hand hovering over his holster, his face flushed with an aggression that didn't match the threat level of the man standing before him. The man was Marcus Thorne, a 62-year-old retired Marine standing tall, his posture perfect, his hands slowly raising to shoulder height, not out of fear, but out of a disciplined calculation to stay alive. To Stanton, Thorne was a vagrant, a threat, a problem to be solved with force. To anyone looking closer, Thorne was a man standing on ground he had earned the right to stand on, facing a boy who had no idea the gravity of the mistake he was making. This confrontation at the Liberty Plaza Veterans Memorial wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a collision of two different Americas, one built on service, sacrifice, and quiet dignity, and another built on suspicion, impulse, and unchecked power. Before we continue into the details of how this Tuesday morning arrest cost the city $1, $7 million, and destroyed a police officer's career, where are you watching from? If you believe that our veterans deserve respect, and that law enforcement must be held to a higher standard, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like this one about the treatment of our heroes need to be told, and your support helps us bring the truth to the surface. Liberty Plaza is the jewel of the downtown district. It is a sprawling, manicured expanse of green grass and polished granite dedicated to the men and women who gave their lives in conflicts spanning from the World Wars to the Middle East. It is a place of reverence. The walkways are lined with oak trees, and the central monument, a massive black granite wall etched with names, reflects the morning sun with a mirror-like finish. It was 10:15 a.m. on a bright Tuesday in May. The air was crisp. The sky was a piercing blue, and the plaza was mostly quiet, save for a few tourists whispering near the fountains and the distant hum of city traffic. In the center of this piece stood Marcus Thorne. He had arrived at 9:45 a.m. carrying a high-end Canon camera, a carbon fiber tripod, and a small gear bag. He wasn't rushing. He moved with a deliberate, rhythmic grace that older military men never lose. He had set up his tripod precisely 12 feet from the granite wall, adjusting the legs until the bubble level was perfectly centered. He wasn't snapping selfies. He was working. He was waiting for the light to hit a specific name on the wall just right. But to the eyes watching him from the administrative office across the plaza, and to the officer speeding toward the scene, Marcus Thorne wasn't a professional photographer or a grieving brother-in-arms. He was a black man with equipment in a high-security zone, and that was enough to trigger a chain of events that would end in disgrace. Marcus Thorne had spent 28 years in the United States Marine Corps. He didn't just serve. He excelled in the kind of environments that break ordinary men. He enlisted at 18, a kid from Chicago looking for direction, and found a home in the discipline of the Corps. By the time he retired as a master sergeant, his service record read like a history book of modern American conflict. He had been on the ground in Beirut. He had led a platoon through the burning oil fields of Desert Storm, and he had done 2 tours in Iraq during the height of the insurgency in Fallujah. He wore the Silver Star for gallantry in action, a Purple Heart for shrapnel he took in his shoulder in 2004, and the respect of every Marine who ever served under him. Now at 62, Marcus lived a quieter life, though he never really slowed down. After retiring, he had turned a hobby into a second career. He was an architectural photographer specializing in government buildings and historical monuments. His work was featured in history books, museum brochures, and federal archives. He was known for his patience. He could stand still for hours waiting for a shadow to move 3 inches, waiting for the perfect moment where the stone and the light spoke the truth of a place. He was a man of immense patience and profound silence. That Tuesday morning, Marcus was on a personal mission, one that had nothing to do with a paycheck. 3 days earlier, he had received a call from the widow of Corporal James "Jimmy" Miller. Jimmy had been Marcus's radio operator in 1991. They had dug foxholes together in the sand. Jimmy hadn't made it back. Jimmy's mother was in hospice care in Ohio, nearing the end of her life, and she had one final wish. She wanted to see her son's name on the new memorial wall in Liberty Plaza. She couldn't travel. She couldn't walk. So Marcus had packed his gear, polished his lenses, and driven 40 miles into the city. He wanted the photo to be perfect. He wanted the sun to catch the engraving of Corporal James A. Miller so that it shone like gold against the black stone. He was doing this for a dying mother and a fallen brother. He was dressed in a pair of pressed khaki trousers, a button-down blue Oxford shirt, and comfortable walking shoes. He looked like a grandfather, a professional, a citizen. He had spent the last 20 minutes wiping dust off the lens, checking his light meter, and standing in silent prayer. He wasn't bothering a soul. He hadn't spoken to anyone. He was simply existing in a space that he, more than almost anyone else in that city, had paid the price to protect. But in the twisted narrative that was about to unfold, his silence was interpreted as defiance, and his presence was seen as a threat. Marcus Thorne knew the look of an enemy. He had looked into the eyes of men who wanted to kill him in 3 different decades. But he was not prepared for the enemy. He was about to face a bureaucrat with a phone and a police officer with a badge, both armed with a bias that blinded them to the truth standing right in front of them. Elena Vance was 34 years old and had been the director of park operations for Liberty Plaza for exactly 6 months. She was a woman who prided herself on cleaning up the downtown district. Her resume was filled with corporate jargon about optimizing public spaces and enhancing visitor experience, which in practice usually meant ensuring that the wrong kind of people didn't linger too long on the benches. She watched the plaza feeds from her second-floor office with the vigilance of a hawk, constantly scanning for skateboarders, homeless individuals, or anyone who disrupted the pristine image of the memorial. At 9:55 a.m., her gaze landed on Marcus Thorne. She didn't see the pressed khakis or the expensive camera gear. She saw a large black man standing motionless near the main wall. She saw a heavy bag at his feet. She saw him checking a device in his hand, a light meter, and her mind immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusion. In her limited worldview, people didn't stand still for 20 minutes, unless they were casing a location or dealing drugs. The camera, she reasoned, was a prop, or perhaps he was conducting surveillance for something nefarious. She watched him for another 5 minutes, her anxiety spiraling into irritation. "He's not a tourist," she muttered to her assistant who was busy filing paperwork. "Tourists take a selfie and leave. He's been there forever. And look at that bag. It's huge. We can't have people camping out at the memorial." She didn't bother to send a park ranger to talk to him. She didn't bother to walk down the stairs and ask, "Sir, can I help you?" She went straight for the nuclear option. She picked up her phone and dialed the direct line to the police dispatch, a number she used with alarming frequency. The call recording would later become a key piece of evidence in the civil rights investigation. 911, what is your emergency? This is Elena Vance at Liberty Plaza Operations. I need an officer dispatched to the memorial wall immediately. Is there a medical emergency, ma'am? No, it's a suspicious person. There is a male African-American, roughly 60 years old, large build. He's been loitering at the main wall for nearly 30 minutes. He has a large duffel bag and some kind of equipment set up on a tripod. It looks like he might be casing the area or planning to vandalize the wall. Is he threatening anyone? Has he displayed a weapon? He's making the visitors uncomfortable. Vance lied. There were perhaps 4 other people in the entire plaza, none of whom were even looking at Marcus. He's acting very aggressive. He's refusing to move. I'm worried about the safety of the memorial. With everything going on, you can't be too careful. He doesn't look like a veteran. He looks like he doesn't belong here. He doesn't look like a veteran. That was the sentence that would haunt her. It was the sentence that stripped away Marcus Thorne's service and reduced him to a stereotype. The dispatcher logged the call as a suspicious person/possible disturbance and routed it to the nearest patrol unit. Elena Vance hung up the phone, feeling a surge of self-righteous satisfaction. She was protecting her park. She was doing her job. She had no idea she had just lit a fuse that would blow her career apart. Officer Derek Stanton was 29 years old and had been with the department for 4 years. In that short time, he had managed to accumulate a personnel file that was thick with counseling memos and remedial training certificates, but thin on actual commendations. He was the kind of officer who confused fear with respect. He believed that commanding a scene meant dominating it physically and verbally from the first second. He had transferred to the downtown beat 3 months prior after a personality conflict with a sergeant in his previous precinct, a polite way of saying he had been moved because his aggression was becoming a liability. Stanton was bored. He was sitting in his cruiser 3 blocks away, scrolling through his phone when the call came in. Suspicious person, Liberty Plaza. Male black, refusal to leave possible casing of the area. Stanton sat up. This was better than writing parking tickets. His mind immediately constructed a scenario, a vagrant, probably high-harassing tourists maybe looking to steal copper or vandalize the granite. He didn't consider for a moment that the call might be exaggerated. He didn't check the notes to see if a park ranger had made contact. He threw the cruiser into gear and flipped on his lights. Not the siren, just the lights cutting through the intersection. He wanted to catch the guy in the act. Stanton had a reputation among the other officers. They called him the Hammer behind his back, and it wasn't a compliment. It meant he treated every problem like a nail. He had a history of escalating low-level encounters. A noise complaint became a disorderly conduct arrest. A broken tail light became a vehicle search. He viewed the public not as a community to serve, but as a minefield of potential threats to his authority. As he pulled up to the curb of Liberty Plaza, he saw the figure standing by the wall. He saw the tripod. He saw the bag. He didn't see the expensive Canon lens or the crisp iron lines on the man's shirt. He saw a target. Stanton slammed the car door and adjusted his belt, marching onto the grass. He bypassed the paved walkway, cutting straight across the lawn, his body language screaming confrontation. He didn't approach with a "good morning." He approached with a hand on his weapon and a shout in his throat. He had already decided how this would go. The suspect would cower, the suspect would leave, or the suspect would go to jail. There was no room in Derek Stanton's world for a third option, where the suspect was actually a superior officer in the hierarchy of life, a man who had commanded battalions while Stanton was still learning to tie his shoes. The bias was already locked in. The narrative was set. He wasn't walking toward a citizen. He was walking toward an arrest. "Hey, you!" Stanton's voice boomed across the quiet plaza, startling a pair of pigeons into flight. Marcus Thorne didn't jump. He didn't flinch. He finished adjusting the aperture on his camera, then slowly turned his head to the left, looking over his shoulder. He saw the young officer storming toward him, sunglasses on hand, resting on the grip of his pistol. Marcus turned his body fully, placing his hands loosely at his sides. He knew the drill. He had trained hundreds of young men on how to handle checkpoints, how to de-escalate, how to assess threats. He saw immediately that this officer had failed the assessment. "Can I help you, officer?" Marcus asked, his voice a deep rumbling baritone that carried without shouting. "I said step away from the equipment," Stanton yelled, stopping 10 feet away. "What do you think you're doing here?" "I am taking a photograph," Marcus said calmly. "I'm waiting for the light to hit the wall. Is there a problem?" "The problem is you're trespassing and loitering. We got a call. You're making people uncomfortable. You need to pack this up and leave, now." Marcus looked around the empty plaza. "Trespassing. This is a public park, officer. It's 10 a.m. I'm a tax-paying citizen. I'm not blocking the path. I'm not disturbing the peace. I'm not going to argue with you. Stanton stepped closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "You don't have a permit for commercial photography." "This isn't commercial," Marcus said, his patience beginning to fray at the edges, though his face remained stone. "This is personal. I am photographing the name of a Marine I served with. I'm doing this for his mother." Stanton laughed, a short, derisive sound. "Yeah, I bet. And I'm the commandant. Look, I don't buy the story. You got a lot of expensive gear there. How do I know you didn't swipe it? Let me see some. ID." Marcus sighed. "My identification is in my back pocket. I'm going to reach for it slowly." "No." Stanton snapped his hand, tightening on his holster. "Don't you reach for anything. You want to get shot. Keep your hands where I can see them." The dynamic had shifted from annoying to dangerous. Marcus recognized the signs of a panic-induced adrenaline dump in the officer. The dilated pupils, the high-pitched voice, the irrational commands. "Officer," Marcus said, switching to his command voice, authoritative, calm, unshakable. "I am a retired Master Sergeant of the United States Marine Corps. I am unarmed. I am compliant. But I am not going to let you treat me like a criminal in front of the men I fought with. I am going to stand here, and you are going to calm down." "Don't you tell me what to do," Stanton shouted, his ego bruised by the older man's authority. "Turn around. You're under arrest." "For what?" Marcus asked, not moving. "Failure to comply, disorderly conduct, resisting. Turn around now, or I will put you on the ground." Stanton didn't wait for compliance. He lunged forward, grabbing Marcus's left wrist and twisting it violently behind his back. It was a move designed to inflict pain to force submission. Marcus winced as his rotator cuff, the one that still held shrapnel from 2004, screamed in protest. But he didn't fight back. He knew that if he pulled away, if he raised an arm to defend himself, Stanton would use it as justification to use his taser or his gun. Marcus had survived urban combat by keeping a cool head. He wasn't going to die in a park because of a rookie cop's fragility. "I am not resisting," Marcus stated loudly, projecting his voice so that the few tourists who had stopped to watch could hear him clearly. "I am complying. You are hurting my shoulder. I have a prior injury. Stop fighting me." Stanton grunted, struggling to pull Marcus's other massive arm back. Marcus wasn't fighting. He was just big, and his muscles were tense from the pain. Stanton kicked Marcus's legs apart, forcing him to stumble forward, his chest slamming against the cold granite of the memorial wall right next to the list of names from the Gulf War. A woman near the fountain had her phone out. A man in a suit was recording from the sidewalk. "Officer, he's not doing anything," the man shouted. "He was just taking pictures." "Back up!" Stanton screamed over his shoulder, sweat dripping down his face. "Interfere and you're next." He finally managed to clasp the handcuffs onto Marcus's wrists. He squeezed them tight, ratcheting them down until they bit into the skin. He spun Marcus around, shoving him away from the wall. Marcus stumbled but regained his footing, staring down at the officer with a look of profound disappointment. "You have made a grave error, son," Marcus said quietly. "You have no idea what you have just done." "Shut up," Stanton panted. "You have the right to remain silent. Use it." Stanton grabbed Marcus by the bicep and marched him across the grass, dragging him past his camera equipment. "My gear," Marcus said. "That is $5,000 of equipment. You cannot leave it there." "Not my problem," Stanton sneered. "Park Services can deal with your trash." They walked past the statue of the World War II infantryman. They walked past the flagpole where the stars and stripes waved in the breeze. Marcus Thorne, a man who had dedicated his life to defending that flag, was being frog-marched like a felon by a man who treated the badge like a hunting license. Stanton shoved Marcus into the back of the patrol car. The space was cramped. Marcus had to hunch over to fit his broad shoulders inside. Stanton slammed the door hard. He got into the front seat, pumped full of adrenaline, feeling like a hero who had just neutralized a threat. He picked up the radio. Dispatch suspect in custody. 1 male, 10 to 15. Transporting to Central. Marcus sat in the back, the pain in his shoulder throbbing. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He didn't yell. He didn't kick the window. He began to memorize the officer's nameplate. D. Stanton. He memorized the time. He memorized the procedure violations. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was a master sergeant gathering intelligence for a court-martial. The drive to the Central Precinct took 15 minutes. Stanton spent the drive listening to talk radio, turning the volume up, ignoring his prisoner. He was already rehearsing his report in his head. Suspect was belligerent. Suspect assumed a fighting stance. Suspect refused to identify. He believed his own lies because he had gotten away with them before. He assumed the sergeant at the desk would sign off on the booking sheet the guy would spend a night in the drunk tank and the charges would eventually be dropped or pleaded down. It was the routine. They pulled into the sally port of the precinct. Stanton hauled Marcus out of the car, gripping his arm tightly again. He walked him through the heavy steel doors into the processing area. The watch commander that morning was Captain Thomas Reynolds. Reynolds was 55, a white man with a buzz cut and eyes that had seen too much. He was a former Army Ranger who had served in Panama and Mogadishu. He ran a tight ship and he had been trying to weed out the cowboys in his department for years. Reynolds looked up from his paperwork as Stanton walked in with Marcus. He saw the handcuffs. He saw the torn khaki shirt where Stanton had grabbed him. But mostly he saw the man. He saw the high and tight haircut graying at the temples. He saw the posture. He saw the way Marcus scanned the room, assessing the exits and the personnel. Reynolds felt a prickle of unease on the back of his neck. "What do we have here, Stanton?" Reynolds asked, standing up slowly. "Trespassing, disorderly, resisting," Stanton recited, dumping a plastic bag of Marcus's personal effects on the counter. "Guy was casing the Liberty Memorial. Refused to leave. Got aggressive." Reynolds looked at Marcus. "Aggressive. This man, he wouldn't show ID. Tried to reach for a weapon." "I was reaching for my wallet," Marcus said, his voice calm, filling the room. "To show him my retired military identification." Reynolds' eyes narrowed. He looked at the plastic bag on the counter. He saw the brown leather wallet. "Open the bag, Stanton," Reynolds ordered. "Captain, I haven't processed him yet. Open the damn bag." Stanton blinked, confused by the tone. He unzipped the evidence bag and dumped the wallet out. Reynolds picked it up. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the Department of Defense Common Access card. Retired. Pay grade E8. Master Sergeant. Reynolds flipped the flap. Behind the plastic window was a card that made his blood run cold. A membership card for the Legion of Valor. You don't get that card for showing up. You get that card for the cross or the star. Reynolds looked up at Marcus Thorne. He looked at the handcuffs digging into the man's wrists. Then he looked at Officer Stanton with an expression of pure, unadulterated fury. "Stanton," Reynolds said, his voice dangerously low. "Do you know who you have in cuffs right now? Some guy who wouldn't listen." Stanton shrugged, though he was starting to feel the shift in the room. "This is a Master Sergeant of the United States Marine Corps," Reynolds barked. "Uncuff him, now." "Captain," he resisted. If you don't take those cuffs off him in the next 3 seconds, I will arrest you for assault myself. Get them off." Stanton fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking. He unlocked the cuffs. Marcus rubbed his wrists, grimacing as the blood flow returned. He straightened his shirt, looked Stanton in the eye, and then turned to Captain Reynolds. "Captain," Marcus said, "I would like to file a formal complaint against this officer. And I would like to know if my camera gear is still sitting on the lawn at Liberty Plaza or if it has been stolen because this officer refused to secure it." The unraveling was swift and absolute. Captain Reynolds didn't just apologize. He went to war. He dispatched a patrol sergeant immediately to Liberty Plaza to secure the camera gear. Thankfully, a park ranger, one who actually had common sense, had seen the arrest and stood guard over the equipment. Reynolds brought Marcus into his office, offering him coffee ice for his shoulder and a chair. He listened as Marcus recounted the entire event. The refusal to look at the ID, the twisting of the arm, the lies about making people uncomfortable. "I was there to take a picture for a dying woman," Marcus said softly. "I wanted to show her that her son wasn't forgotten. Instead, I was treated like an insurgent in my own country." Reynolds was mortified. He pulled the body camera footage immediately. He watched it on his monitor while Marcus sat there. He saw the aggression. He heard the lies. He saw a man standing peacefully being attacked by a man with a badge. Reynolds suspended Stanton on the spot. He stripped him of his badge and gun in the middle of the squad room. "Go home, Stanton. Don't come back until Internal Affairs calls you, and pray they don't charge you criminally." But the damage was done. The video from the bystanders had already hit the internet. By noon, the headline was everywhere: "Marine vet arrested at Memorial." The video showed the brutal contrast, the stoic, well-dressed black man being manhandled by the screaming young white officer. The optics were catastrophic. The internet detectives went to work. They found Marcus's service record. They found the photos of him in Fallujah. They found the Silver Star citation. Then they found Elena Vance. The 911 call was released under public records requests within days. Her voice, claiming he didn't look like a veteran, played on every news station in the state. The veterans of foreign wars, the American Legion, and the NAACP formed a coalition that demanded heads roll. The mayor's office was besieged. This wasn't just police brutality. It was a desecration of the values the city claimed to hold. Marcus Thorne filed a federal civil rights lawsuit alleging unlawful arrest, excessive force, and racial profiling. His lawyer, a sharp former prosecutor, laid it out simply: if a master sergeant with a silver star isn't safe from racial bias in a public park, then no one is. Elena Vance was fired 3 days later. The Parks Department issued a scathing statement condemning her profiling. She tried to claim she was just following protocol, but the audio recording of her lies destroyed her defense. Officer Derek Stanton was not just fired. He was decertified by the state board, meaning he could never work in law enforcement again. The internal investigation revealed he had turned off his body audio during the transport, a violation of policy that implied he had said things he didn't want recorded. The city knew they couldn't win in court. The jury would be shown the photo of Marcus in his dress blues, then the video of him being shoved against the wall. They settled for $1.7 million. Marcus didn't keep all the money. He started a foundation to provide legal defense for veterans mistreated by police. 6 months later, Marcus Thorne returned to Liberty Plaza. It was another bright Tuesday. This time he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by Captain Reynolds, who had become a friend, and a group of young Marine recruits. The city had issued a formal apology read aloud at a press conference on the plaza steps. Marcus set up his tripod in the exact same spot. He adjusted his lens. He waited for the light. He found the name Corporal James O'Miller. The sun hit the gold lettering, making it glow against the black stone. He took the shot. He printed it, framed it, and drove it to Ohio. Jimmy's mother was weak, barely holding on, but she smiled when she saw it. She ran her fingers over the glass. She died 2 days later, at peace, knowing her son was remembered. Marcus stood back at the memorial that day, watching the people walk by. He saw a young black kid with a backpack looking at the names. He saw a police officer walking the beat, a new guy, respectful, nodding at the visitors. The settlement money had changed Marcus's financial life, but it hadn't fixed the crack in his heart. The money couldn't erase the feeling of those handcuffs. It couldn't erase the realization that his service, his sacrifice, and his medals were invisible to people like Elena Vance and Derek Stanton until it was too late. Justice had been served, yes. The bad actors were gone. But the scar remained. It was a reminder that the uniform you take off never commands as much respect as the skin you live in, and that the fight for dignity is a war that never truly ends. What would you have done if you witnessed this arrest? Do you think the $1.7 million settlement was enough for the humiliation of a war hero? Let us know in the comments below. And if you believe that character matters more than color, and that our veterans deserve better, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We will keep telling these stories until the world listens.